Ashley, things are getting pretty crazy in this castle.
Ugh, it stinks.
You need a bump?
No way, Leon.
How's it going, my evil residents? On today, the funny number day, I wanted to take a look at the most famous green leafy plant in the Resident Evil series, the green herb. Yeah, I've put together a brief history of green herbs and healing in general throughout the Resident Evil series, and yeah, I won't waste any more of your time. Let's get right into the video. The first we hear about green herbs is in the botany book in the small library on the second floor of the Spencer Mansion in the first Resident Evil game. As you may know, there are many plants that have medical effects. Since ancient times, humans have been healing wounds and diseases using various plants. In this book, we're going to sample 3 herbs that grow around the Raccoon Mountains and give their outlines as examples of those plants with medical properties. Each herb has different colors and different effects as medical plants. The green one recovers physical strength, the blue one neutralizes natural toxins, while the red herb does not have any effect by itself. The red herb is only effective when it is mixed with other herbs. For example, if you mix this herb with the herb that recovers physical strength, the recovery effect will be tripled. By adjusting the amount and experimenting with these 3 herbs, you can create various kinds of medicines. But I'll leave the details in your hands, because that's the best way to acquire true knowledge. Now, aside from this being a kind of terrible botany book that just says figure it out on your own, which works well for a survival horror game, not very well for an actual book, it does give players a good start for how herbs would work in this game and pretty much any game after this one. As far as the first 3 original Resident Evil games are concerned, you had red herbs, green herbs, and blue herbs. Green herbs healed you, red herbs did nothing on their own, but if you combine them with the green herb, healed you completely, and if you combined all 3 together, healed you completely and cured your poison. But the blue herb notably did cure your poison on its own. Throughout the first trilogy, herbs would stay consistent and reliably the same throughout all 3 of those games. Even in the Outbreak series, they would stay the same, though some herbs would reduce your virus gauge, which has its own mechanic on its own, that is somewhat separate from the herbs. This is not a retrospective on that game, so I won't go too into that, plus I haven't played it, so I'm not one to speak on it super deeply. If you want to hear more about that, there are plenty of other Resident Evil YouTubers that have played it that can tell you a lot more about how the virus gauge works in there. But the next shakeup as far as herbs go is in Resident Evil Gaiden, which is a Game Boy Resident Evil game. In this game, we are given yellow herbs and the only appearance of this herb, purple herbs. Now, herb effects are a little bit mixed up in this game. Blue herbs do as they did before, they canceled your poison, but you could find a purple herb that would cancel your infection and restore a lot of your health. So it kind of acted as a green, red, blue herb, but instead of just being called mixed herbs like in the previous games, it was a purple herb. This game also had a yellow herb, though its function would change in the next game we're going to talk about. In this game, the yellow herb just restores a medium amount of damage between a green herb and a red herb. Notably in this game, you could not combine herbs, so it went green healed the least, then yellow, then red, and then blue healed your poison, and then purple healed your poison, and then healed you about as much as the yellow herb did. I'm surprised the purple herb hasn't made a comeback in any capacity whatsoever, even just doing a different effect, but it is cool and notable that it is in this game, and I wanted to make sure to bring it up because it's the only instance of it existing in a Resident Evil game. Moving on to Resident Evil 4 in 2005, where the yellow herb would make a comeback, but with a completely different purpose. In Resident Evil 4, the yellow herb cannot be used on its own and replaces the blue herb. Not in its poison effect, but replaces it wholly. There is no poison in Resident Evil 4. Instead, the yellow herb serves the function of upgrading your health or Ashley's health if you're playing the original. In the remake, you cannot upgrade Ashley's health. It is a completely different mechanic. You cannot use the yellow herb unless it's first combined with a green herb, and if you combine all 3 together, it is the only way to heal all of your health up from basically having no health. Otherwise, red and green herbs in this game will not heal your health fully. They will heal it most of the way, but not completely. Next up, we move to Resident Evil 5. In this game, the healing system would take some notes from Resident Evil 4, but remove the yellow herbs completely, seemingly just to streamline the gameplay, because juggling yellow herbs between a co-op partner, that might get a little bloody. I do think yellow herbs would serve a good gameplay mechanic in a Resident Evil 5 remake as sort of like a revive system, but that is a different video for another day. Resident Evil 5 is sort of a step back from Resident Evil 4 in the way that there is no yellow herbs. It's just red and green, and you can just combine them, or use green on their own, or you can combine a green and a green, whatever you really want to do with those. Next up, we're actually going to talk about Resident Evil Revelations, because in this game, there is no herb combining whatsoever. It's literally just a tap of the button and you heal. There is no combining herbs, there's no breaking down herbs or anything like that. There's no real inventory management with them either. It's just collect herb. Herb is now in your inventory. You can only hold so many herbs. Just tap the button to use them. This is about the simplest we're ever going to see it in this game. It does get a little bit more complicated in the next game, and then simpler again after that. So let's move on to those games. I will not be talking about Revelations 2 because it works the same as it does in this game. Next up is Resident Evil 6, and this game has what I like to call the tic-tac herb system, where in this game, you pick up herbs and that adds to your inventory. You then combine these herbs in your inventory and they stay in your inventory until you add that sheet of herbs that are combined into your tab case, which then you can pop out as you need to, but you cannot use the herbs when they're in your inventory. You can only use them when they're in a little tic-tac case. It's a little bit of a clunky system, but once you get the hang of it, you can really exploit it and get a ton of healing items. This game can be a little stingy with healing items, so once you get the hang of this mechanic, it really, if you don't understand the combining and storing mechanic of the herbs in this game, it's really punishing because the game seems to be stingy with health items. But once you understand the mechanic and you kind of are more familiar with the game, you can really exploit how many healing items you have. And it kind of works as a way to boost experienced players' skills, but it does punish more amateur players, which I'm not a huge fan of. I wish healing items were just a little bit more common and they made red herbs just a little bit more rare to kind of counteract this. But overall, I do think this is an interesting system. It could just be refined a little bit more for another game. We're going out of order a little bit. We're actually going to talk about Resident Evil 2 Remake, because in that game, the blue herb, when combined with the red herb, you can just take them like that or combine it with the green herb if you really wish. It actually boosts your damage resistance. As far as I know, it is the only game that does this, because blue herbs are not in Resident Evil 3 Remake because there's no poison. I just wanted to highlight this mechanic right here because it's really interesting, and it's the only Resident Evil game with this mechanic. I think it's really cool, and I do think it should make a comeback in some capacity. I just think that would be awesome. Now we will move on to Resident Evil 7 and 8. These two use about the same healing mechanic. Basically, you find an herb, and there are no red herbs to speak of. There's just herb, or it's a green herb, but the game just calls it herb. You combine this with chem fluid that you find throughout the baker house or the village, whichever place you are wandering about, and you combine them together, and then Ethan simply pours all of it onto his hand. The most notable thing about this healing system is that once you know you can cancel out of the animation by just tapping the block button, you can heal instantly and faster than any other Resident Evil game. It's a little bit broken, but it does reward players on repeat playthroughs that learn the mechanics while also not punishing amateur players too hard, because you can still block at any point in the animation as long as the liquid is like out of the bottle. And it's just a fun learning mechanic that really makes you feel like you're getting the hang of the game, especially in repeat playthroughs. It helps you kind of keep your pace up a little bit. And I think it's really fun and a really interesting mechanic. If I were to pick my favorite healing system of all of the Resident Evil games for the herbs, I would say it's got to be a mix of the classic 1 to 3 red, green, blue, combine, cure poison, stuff like that. I think either that one or the Resident Evil 4 system with the yellow herbs. Both of those are really good systems, and then especially in Resident Evil 4 with New Game Plus, being able to sell the yellow herbs once your health is already maxed out completely, and you don't really need them. It does reward you for doing repeat playthroughs with a little bit of extra money if you're trying to upgrade all of the weapons. I would say those two are my favorite healing systems in the Resident Evil series, but like I said, I do think a Resident Evil 5 healing system with a yellow herb that works as like a revive system, I think that would be awesome. Not sure how they would balance it, and like I said, that's another video for another day. And yeah, that is pretty much the history of herbs in Resident Evil for today's silly funny number day. If you liked the video, feel free to drop a like. If you want more content like this, subscribe. That would be awesome. I do have a Twitter if you want to follow me. It is linked on my channel page, and I will probably link it in the description. We also have channel memberships up on the channel if you want to become a member. It only starts at 99 cents. If you want to help me out more directly, any money I get from this channel just goes back into the channel. So yeah, if you support me on there, that would be greatly appreciated. Obviously, if you do not, if you don't have the means to, or just don't want to, if you enjoyed the video, if you watched the video, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching, and yeah, stay evil, my residents.